I assure you at least some of these rankings are not what you expect. We're going to be ranking the top 50 most recognizable tech companies, best to worst. I'm going to tell you which ones you want on your resume in order to make your way into the $1 Million PM Club as soon as possible. I'm going to be looking at recognizability. This is how much of a magnet these logos and names are on your resume for recruiters, hiring managers, and top product leaders. The second thing I'm going to be checking for is compensation, how much you can get paid there on that role in that company. The third thing I'm going to be checking is stability. What can we expect to happen over the next 2, 3, 5 years with the stock price, the equity? Because a majority of your compensation as a $500,000, $700,000, or $1 million PM compensation is going to come from equity. So we want to understand what is likely to happen to our equity in the next 2, 3, 5 years. And then the actual learnings, the things you can actually learn on the job in those companies. So that's how I think about bucketing these. First, we have Paramount. So Paramount is a legacy media company. We're going to start things off at C because it can work if you're trying to break into the entertainment or gaming business or even some consumer tech, but it's not going to carry a lot of weight with recruiters. I'm only leaving it in C for now because I think there's going to be worse things on this list that are going to end up in D, but we will see. Next, we've got AT&T, obviously a huge conglomerate. Remember, the revenue that these companies make, the profit, is not really one of our considerations. What we're looking at is recognizability. Will recruiters actually stop to look at this company, to look at your resume if you've got it on your CV, and how much you can make? You can't really make a lot at Paramount, AT&T, so I'm going to put it somewhere in the C tier together. Comcast, same thing, but there's obviously Comcast is a conglomerate, so it owns quite a lot of companies. You can actually make quite a bit more at Comcast, but only in senior roles, but I will for now put it above AT&T. It is only somewhat recognizable. It is decent compensation. I don't really think it's hard to break 500, 550 in Comcast, and it doesn't really have a lot to teach you in terms of the things that you're going to need in top tech. So I'm going to put it in B tier. Really, it should be somewhere between B and C, maybe close to AT&T. We will determine as we go. Warner Brothers, another legacy brand. I'm going to put it right there with Paramount. The only reason it might be better is because it has gaming connotations. Other than that, it's very similar to Paramount. Now, Disney, you would think it would go here, but no. Because Disney is a multifaceted company, it is an entertainment company, but it has physical business, obviously the theme parks, but it has a huge component from a media company and then the software company in Disney Plus, which is a major competitor to Netflix. It actually goes definitely into the B tier, so above all these other media companies, possibly even into the A tier. Compensation is not quite there, although it can be quite significant, especially in some of the tech parts of Disney and Disney Plus. So it could even be A, but in terms of names, in terms of mobility, in terms of recognizability, very high. You can easily use Disney to jump into a big tech company. You can use it to jump into Netflix, for instance. I'm going to put it in A, actually, for now, in terms of what you can get. Recognizability, very high. Ability to travel to top tech, yes. Compensation, very high. Moderate to very high, I would say. And then in terms of what you can do in there, there's some interesting stuff that's going on. Obviously, Disney Plus is the flagship of where you want to be if you want to be a tech PM. There's a lot of consumer stuff. There's some ad stuff. There's some optimization, recommendation. There's going to be interesting stuff. It is certainly a legacy brand, so there's that. So don't expect it to be cutting edge technology. But for now, I'm putting it in A. We'll see as things continue to come up on this list. And now we have the big Amazon, Jeffrey Bezos. You would think that we put it straight into S tier because it's part of the FAANG, Mang, right? Magnificent Seven, phenomenal company, still a monopolist, still a top tech company. However, today, I would not put it in S tier just because of the competition. So it actually belongs somewhere between A and B tier because it is harder than ever to get big compensation packages. You have to stay there for a long time and get promoted and high performance. It's hard to get huge compensation packages right out of the gate with Amazon. Also, the equity is backloaded, which is great if you want to stay and work there for a substantial amount of time. Not great if you're trying to get huge compensation up front, for instance, like Google. It's going to front load a lot of the equity. I'm going to leave it in A for now because obviously it's top tier, very recognizable, but it doesn't give you quite as much as it would have given you in yesteryear because it just simply has a ton of workers. A ton of people have worked at Amazon already. So it a little bit lost its luster, lost its appeal. Yes, you're going to get recruiter callbacks, you're going to get interest, but it's not going to be a slam dunk. It's not going to be a guarantee. Oh, you worked at Amazon? For sure you're going to get a callback. That's not the case anymore. So because of that, we're going to downgrade it to A. We're going to put it ahead of Disney, or will we? I don't know. Let's put it together for now. Let's actually try to organize these by priority. So we'll stack rank them, but within each tier, we're going to organize them as well. I'm a product manager, so I can't help but stack rank things. Hopefully you'll appreciate this. We're going to put Warner Brothers like that. We're going to put Warner Brothers first, then AT&T, then Paramount. And let's keep going. Now we're going into our gaming category. So Riot Games, you're going to recognize it. It's obviously a very well-known game studio. You're not necessarily going to jump into a whole lot of tech companies from gaming. So I'm going to put it in our C tier for now, somewhere around here, because you can jump into consumer tech and a few other areas like data, but it's not super well known outside of gaming and entertainment. And probably the same goes for other gaming companies, which I would put even lower. The thing about Epic Games, though, is it is of course also an engine, so it's a platform on top of being a gaming and entertainment company, so it probably will beat out certainly Riot Games, perhaps even Warner Brothers as well. It's quite niche. From gaming, it's hard to break out. It's relatively hard to break out. My favorite recommendation is into either big tech companies that have a gaming platform, which is the way that I got into Google, in fact, or big tech companies that have consumer platforms where you can leverage your consumer experience into a consumer brand as opposed to a gaming brand. EA Sports, we're going to put all the way down here. And by the way, EA Sports, I mean Electronic Arts in general. It's a big gaming brand, so it deserves to be somewhere together with Riot Games. Now, Roblox is a bit more of a phenomenon. It is a platform. It is not just a gaming system, so it's a platform, but it's a bigger platform than Epic, and it's much better position in the industry, much more recognized these days. Obviously, it's going through all kinds of drama in the news and on an ongoing basis, and it goes through swings in terms of equity. So because of that, it can't really go into S tier or possibly even A tier, but it does live between these two. So I would say for now, I'm going to put it close to Amazon. Gets you really good recognizability. You can usually demonstrate a lot of impact because there's still relatively few people working there. And usually you do work with revenue, and whichever side of the market inside Roblox you work, you will usually get to touch, meaning take advantage of your impact on the revenue or user side. And very high compensation. So it deserves, I think, a spot in the A tier. All right, here's another big one. You've been waiting for this one. Meta, Facebook. Obviously, this is a huge moneymaker, huge monopolist, probably one of the top paying companies for product managers on our entire list. I have to put it in the S tier. This is our first S tier company, and the reason is top band compensation. Usually they pay top of market in almost any level. You can get $700, $800, $900, $1 million as an ICPM at Meta. You also get pretty great recognizability. If you've worked as a PM at Meta, you're going to have a much, much easier time to get into the door of any other tech company, and not even a tech company. Just as a PM, you're going to have a lot more callbacks. You're going to also learn quite a bit, especially if you're in advertising side of things, or if you're in the consumer side of things, recommendations, or some of their AI stuff, or even some of their AR and VR efforts. So there's a lot of room to travel. You can move internally. You can move from hardware if that's your specialty, or from gaming if that's your specialty, or from finance even. Like, you can move around and kind of reshape your career arc and your career story internally. Yes, when you join, you have to stay there for a year and do what you got to do, but then you can actually move around internally and move into other areas that you might have had an interest in. So this is our first S tier. We've now got some lesser known brands, but ones that actually make quite a splash. I would put Datadog somewhere between A and B, as it is very well respected, high growth, high revenue. A lot of PMs come out of Datadog into bigger roles. So it's a really good stepping stone. I would say somewhere in the B and A tier. I'm going to put it in high B tier for now, just because it's not quite at this level, but very high compensation as well. A lot of learning as well. It's a smaller company. Cisco, legacy, it doesn't, I've kind of bucketed a few of these companies together, but Cisco is very specific, very niche. If you experience working at Cisco, you're not really going to have license to travel. So in your domain, you're going to get callbacks for sure. But outside of your domain, it's not really applicable to anything else. So I'm going to put it in the D tier. Snowflake, very well respected nowadays. It is, from a compensation perspective, it's not quite there. They do have substantial and competitive packages. I think it belongs to somewhere next to Datadog from a recognizability, compensation, and opportunities. Cloudflare obviously powers a big portion of the enterprise world, and so I will bucket them from a recognizability perspective a little bit below these companies. So it feels like this is a good spot for it, because you're going to get a little bit of interest, but primarily again in kind of your niche, your space. Broadcom, same deal. It probably belongs above Cisco, but somewhere in this category where if you got the right experience for a particular role, then that Broadcom experience in the name, it will have some weight, but not a whole lot. Qualcomm, I'm going to roughly, I know it's different business, different areas, but I'm going to roughly bundle them. Not a huge compensation, probably even somewhere right here, because you can leverage some of your experience into the right stuff. Obviously, they power like the majority of chips, and you can travel into specific areas from within there, but there's not a whole lot of upward trajectory, upward mobility with this brand, and certainly not a lot of compensation. All right, you love them, you use them. Apple, probably the biggest money maker on this whole list. I think they made $100 billion in profit in 2024. I'm thinking about whether to put them into S tier or A tier. The reason, ordinarily, they would be an S tier because it's Apple, high revenue, high profit, the best consumer brand, well known, respected, absolutely open doors, especially for design, especially for consumer, but also on the enterprise side of things. It gives you license to travel. Compensation is good, not as good as Meta and a few of these other companies. And the other reason why I kind of don't want to put them in S tier right now is because of their really missteps from an AI perspective, from a VR, AR perspective. They're sort of participating, they're not participating, they're doing things with it, they're not doing things. In AI, they're really slow, like they've partnered with ChatGPT, they're not really doing much else. So they're starting to ride on their laurels a little bit. And of course, it's Apple, they can certainly do that. But there's no reason why they can't reinvent themselves again and make something useful around AI. They're probably just biding their time in order to actually make something that's way better than the first mover, but they're not rushing to make a first mover advantage after, of course, OpenAI and the rest of them. So I'm going to put them as the number one for our A tier list. And this kind of makes me want to move everybody else again to the right. So I'll think about how Apple and Meta shake up over here. But let's keep going. We are going to go with some of our consumer apps. So Spotify, of course, huge consumer apps. I'm just going to start putting them somewhere. From a recognizability perspective, Spotify is pretty terrific. Compensation is high. I think they're very remote friendly, if not fully remote. They will open a lot of doors for you, especially on the consumer side of things, but there's also room to travel because they're kind of in the entertainment space. Now that I'm doing this, I realize that Spotify will get you high recognizability, a medium to high compensation, really good flexibility, and really good outlook from a future perspective. So I'm going to put them somewhere around here above Amazon and right next to Disney. This feels like the right spot for them. Snapchat has issues with growth, so there's sort of always been this second tier social player. They've certainly been growing, but they have never really been able to 10x and 100x from where they were to become true competitors to the monopolists or oligopolist that is the Meta Google domination in the ad space. We will put them as probably in the B tier, top of B tier, because they give you license to travel, especially ads, again, consumer stuff. They're pretty well paid, so high compensation. In fact, so high that we might want to move them over here in the A tier. But I don't know how much learning there really is. I don't know how much long-term potential there is. So because of that, they are on the tail end of our A tier. Continuing with our consumer tech, we got Airbnb, very, very recognizable. I would put it somewhere around Spotify, high compensation, and also there's particulars about the way that the product management function works there that I think will give you a lot of very useful experience. High ability to travel with the Airbnb name and high compensation. It puts it firmly in the middle of our A tier. Reddit. Reddit is a bit of a reminder of the old tech world. It's a very old company, but it has come around and it's sort of the staple of today's internet. In fact, it powers a ton of your ChatGPT responses. However, it doesn't really give you upward mobility. They don't pay a whole lot. It's decent, but it's not a whole lot. That is not a whole ton of learnings. There's things that they could build. I'm going to put them firmly into B tier, right in the middle of B tier. Pinterest, as an example, is another social app which had potential. Nowadays does not seem to be showing the growth that they had in previous years. Because of that, because it's relatively niche, like a niche social site, it will land in our either end of the B tier, not high compensation, well, reasonably high compensation. So I think this is the right spot for it. Decent recognizability, but not broadly, so only in the consumer space. No real potential for growth and learning, not a lot. Instacart is extremely high paid, extremely high growth, and in general definitely deserves to be in the A tier, probably right around Airbnb, maybe even higher. In fact, from a compensation perspective, from a growth perspective, from a multi-sided market perspective, it could even make a run at S tier because of your potential to travel. But because ultimately you can travel farther with a Meta name or an Apple name, I am going to reorganize this way. So Instacart gets you further than Airbnb. Airbnb gets you further than Disney. Disney a little bit further than Spotify. Spotify a little bit further than Amazon. I think we've stack ranked this correctly. They're all very, very good companies, very good contenders, but I think this is the proper stack ranking in my view. Continue going down. Expedia, another old world app and company. Let us put them somewhere around Reddit, higher than Reddit because of the consumer facing experience that you have. It is really solid mid tier. You know, this is just like the middle of the mid tier. I think this is appropriate. And I will just reorganize Datadog here where, sorry, Datadog, ultimately for recognizability, compensation, and movement forward in terms of the maximum options for mobility, you're going to have these user-facing companies are going to edge out some of our Datadog and Snowflake and other companies that don't have a consumer aspect to them. Uber, truly a top tech company, probably beats the rest of these companies, beats even Apple from a compensation, recognizability. I mean, it's just as recognizable as Apple. From a design perspective, it's worse. But from a growth perspective and the speed, execution, and frankly, like the vision and the aim that these companies have, I would say they're kind of neck and neck. Maybe it even should go in the S tier together with Apple. We might in fact put them there. For now, Meta is looking kind of lonely over there. All right, then we have Robinhood, which is a smaller company, but a recognizable one and a good example of the fact that you don't need to be a gigantic company in order to be recognizable, high paid, and provide potential for upward mobility. So where are we going to put it? We could put it somewhere around here from a Disney, from a recognizability perspective. But because it's niche and it primarily deals with fintech related, we will have to drop it down and we will put it somewhere around here, the middle of B tier. You can leverage it to get into consumer stuff, into further fintech, maybe a few other areas, maybe trust and safety potentially. But ultimately, you're not going to have full capacity to move unless you move into, let's say, a Meta or Apple or Uber area of the business, which has to do with finance. And that is a valid strategy for moving upward in these tiers. All right, DoorDash. DoorDash these days is going to be somewhere around here. top of A tier. Very high paid. In fact, only recently have they started to slightly drop their bands, but they used to be top of band, right there together with Meta. Recently, DoorDash has lowered their compensation a little bit, but in terms of the ability to travel, it is very high. There's a lot of things going on. It's very rapid growth. There's still a lot of very manual stuff over there, and it has had to really fight for its survival in the last 5, 7, 10 years in order to even become a market leader. So it really has that scrappiness mentality. So you'll be working a lot, you'll learn a lot, you'll make a lot, and it opens up the opportunity to travel pretty much anywhere you want. And now, as an example, eBay, which is another old world app and company, kind of together with PayPal. In fact, we have PayPal and it's next. It will not be as recognizable today, so we will put it into C tier, probably somewhere around the gaming space. Maybe it's tough to say. So let's walk through the logic here. So eBay is somewhat recognizable. You're usually going to have impact. It's a multi-sided marketplace. You have the ability to travel further than just gaming. So by that logic, it lives somewhere together with Epic because Epic is also a platform. PayPal will be higher than eBay, but also fintech and fintech related experience. So perhaps it's closer than Robinhood, but it's pretty close. It's a slightly lower tier, but it's top C. Robinhood is bottom B. So this makes sense. Where should Microsoft be? Surely it should be in the top. It is a huge moneymaker, huge revenue, huge profits, well-known, controls enterprise, biggest sales force ever. But nowadays, from a compensation perspective, it is good, not very high. So right away, I don't think it deserves into S. It doesn't really have a whole ton of innovation or speed of work. And it doesn't really get as much interest from recruiters as something like a Meta or an Apple or an Uber or a DoorDash or an Instacart or an Airbnb. And we could kind of keep going, where Microsoft, I think, is probably our only, so far, top tech company that is going to be all the way into B tier, top of B tier, which is not even that far from Amazon, which is bottom of A tier. Similar thing is happening where Microsoft doesn't automatically open all the doors for you. It is kind of context specific. It doesn't give you the best compensation, so it doesn't quite belong together. So you see that even though you might think of Meta and Microsoft and Apple and Amazon and Uber as all the same thing, it's not quite the same thing. And they are on 3 different tiers. Let's take Intuit, which is a strange company to be in top tech because they make tax, TurboTax, and QuickBooks. Those are their big companies. Those are their big brands. But I don't think you knew that Intuit is a monopolist on the tax software. TurboTax pretty much controls the entire U.S. tax market. And in fact, so much so that they pretty much lobby against the United States government, basically stop the government from releasing free tools to be able to file your taxes. I'm going to put Intuit in the B tier. So it is somewhere around here. It's going to get you recognized, mostly in specific areas, probably worse than Microsoft. Microsoft still has a general appeal. Intuit has less of a general appeal. However, Intuit pays a whole lot. They really pay a lot. So because of that, I'm going to put them right next to Microsoft. Next, Stripe, the fintech darling. I mean, this thing powers commerce these days, it feels like. So even though it's not yet a public tech company, they've been threatening and saying how they're going to IPO any day now, but it hasn't happened. However, they pay medium amount. They don't pay a ton because they're still pre-IPO. So they're kind of banking on the fact that IPO, there's going to be additional growth and equity growth. But they also move fast, and boy, oh boy, do they power the world of commerce. So because of that, they're definitely going to be in the A tier, and it's going to be above Disney for sure, above Airbnb, somewhere around Instacart level of recognizability, high compensation, medium compensation, but high compensation potential with the IPO, great learning, great speed of execution, great ability to travel. Shopify, while we're still on the finance theme, Stripe is going to be much more well known to these recruiters, and because of that, it deserves to be an A. I think Shopify will put it somewhere around Microsoft level. So B level, it's certainly above all these gaming companies, etc., but ultimately it's still somewhat limited by its domain. LinkedIn, of course, is part of Microsoft, but because it's so well known and it powers a lot of modern day tech information sharing, that it kind of deserves its own call out. And I think LinkedIn actually is still in A, where it will get you interest and will get you seen and recognized by recruiters and hiring managers more so than Snapchat, more so than Microsoft. And there's still a lot of aspects to LinkedIn. It's still a social network. It's a fast growing social network. Even now, they're building out their ads. They are relevant in the job market. And because of all of those things, they're kind of well connected and can give you compensation that's obviously similar to Microsoft because Microsoft, but it's its own entity. It still lives as its own entity. So I would put it above the B tier and above its parent company, Microsoft. Salesforce, obviously a gigantic provider of CRM ultimately. And of course, they repivoted just like everybody on this list to AI, but obviously a very big, well-known company. It has the tallest building in San Francisco, I'm pretty sure, the Salesforce Tower. So, and it does, but it is kind of it's not really a tech company, but it's always lived in the tech company's world, which has really been fascinating to watch over the last multiple decades. So we're going to put it somewhere around Shopify and Microsoft. B tier, it lets you move into travel, and in fact, being next to Intuit is almost perfect for where they should be. We're almost done here. We're going to deal with a few of our well-known. Is this the time where we break out Google? I think you know where it's going to end. Or do you? I'm going to tease Google a little bit more. Let's get into some of these old world companies. We'll do them rapid fire. HP, huge brand that's well-known, does not give you a whole lot of movement right now. So it probably deserves to be somewhere around here. Higher than some of these companies, which makes me actually move Broadcom down one. And HP, Best Buy is an interesting one. So this is a great transitional company to be in. You wouldn't think of Best Buy, which is a retailer basically, as a top tech, well-recognized company, but it is, and it probably lives higher than HP and probably higher than these gaming companies because you can pull out a lot of impact from there. You can do e-commerce stuff, and ultimately you can get into Best Buy a little bit easier than some of these other companies, and you can leverage that to continue to jumping and climbing these tiers. IBM legacy, a lot of time, cloud and consulting nowadays, it has certainly lost a lot of its luster. So we're going to put it somewhere here, probably above the gaming companies because it is applicable across the board, but it will not turn heads as it once did. Dell, same deal, probably even below HP on our list. Now let's do some of our chip makers. We've got Intel, we've got AMD, we've got NVIDIA. Intel is really on the spot quite low. It is quite low. It is below IBM, and it really it's hard to move around from Intel. It's certainly a very well recognized name. It does not pay nearly as much as some of these other tech companies. And travel is difficult because you're kind of typecast to be a hardware PM. And the same deal goes for AMD, which is about there. And the same theoretically goes for NVIDIA, if not for the fact that NVIDIA, because it was able to ride a variety of these waves with gaming first, right, powering the gaming chips, then using those same chips to power crypto, then, as it turns out, using those same chips to power AI. I mean, it has just gotten extremely lucky, and maybe is because of hard work and effort and resilience and vision. That's a lot of tailwinds, right? A ton of tailwinds for NVIDIA, which I think is now the company with the most millionaires. Something like 80% of employees in NVIDIA are millionaires because of the insane meteoric rise of its stock. So because of that, you would think I'd put it in S tier because you can certainly be $1 million PM at NVIDIA. But the thing is, once you're at NVIDIA, it's a little bit difficult to leave And also, when you're coming in now, you're kind of at the top. So they have to throttle you down a little bit when you're coming in. And any movement in the stock long term could put you back below where you started out from a compensation perspective. And also, it's a very specific type of company where you're kind of focusing on a specific type of work. So it does not translate easily to a lot of these other tech companies. So you can leverage a lot of these companies to get into NVIDIA for a payday, but NVIDIA is hard to actually leverage to move around. So because of that, I'm going to put it in A tier, somewhere in the middle, where the compensation certainly makes it tremendously lucrative. The future still looks extremely bright, but there's not a whole lot of additional movement after NVIDIA. It is a bit of a terminal, I think, spot. It doesn't really give you additional visibility or credibility with recruiters unless it's for a specific niche, specific area. We're almost finished. We have under 10 names left here, and thank you for your patience as we continue ranking these companies and see where you end up if you work for these companies now. So I'm going to throw up just a few more notable companies. So Target, another one of our good to travel list. It's a consumer brand. It belongs kind of together with Best Buy, but it has a huge presence in software and apps, and you can use it to jump around into these higher tiers. Another one that is very good for moving around, we'll put it right below Best Buy, is Capital One. This is fintech, so you can kind of move primarily around fintech, but because it's consumer and it's seen as a more innovative company, that's kind of pushed the envelope for what's possible with a credit card company, like an old world finance company. But you can travel. People will know, recruiters and hiring managers will know this company, will know Capital One, and they'll be able to source from it to go hire, for instance, Intuit or Salesforce or Shopify or Microsoft or even some of these A-tier companies. Netflix. This is another one of these that deserves to be at the top. Netflix pays the most. It is extremely respected from a recruiter hiring manager perspective. It has great opportunities still ahead of it, but they do have to reinvent themselves because competition is fiercer than ever before. So because of that, it's going to go into the very top of A, maybe into S, perhaps because compensation really is sky high. Very hard to get into, very selective. Once you're in, though, you're in, and they expect you to commit for a number of years. Let me see a few other companies. Okay, so now let's bring out Google. So Google ordinarily will be right here with Meta. Top paid, absolutely top of band. Opportunities across the board. Huge AI lab, right? One of the top 4, 5, 6, 7 premier AI labs, and probably the top 2, if you think about it. I mean, they came up with the T in GPT, the transformer, all the way back in, 2018, with the concept of transformer technology. And of course, they pay top of band, and of course, you can travel. The name is very well recognized, and recruiters love it. Google is in a bit of an existential crisis right now, and it's been apparent ever since November 2022. 2023 or 2020? Yeah, November 2022 when ChatGPT came out. Since then, the existential crisis for Google has only continued. And that's why you have such a huge investment in Gemini and everything AI related, because they understand that, look, if before ChatGPT, Google controlled 80% of inbound internet traffic, like, hey, let me Google that. Post ChatGPT, we are now GPTing it, or let me talk to GPT, let me ask GPT. So even if GPT cuts out 20, 30, 40% of Google's pie, that will destroy its monopolistic position, destroy its revenue, destroy growth, destroy profits. So that's why I'm a little bit bearish on Google's longer term equity health. Of course, we can argue about this in the comments, and we should, but because of that, I can't really put Google in S tier, so I'll put it at the very top of A tier because, of course, it's still the best of the best, the most recognized, gives you the most mobility to travel, the most opportunities, great compensation, and great ability to work in AI. So it will still be in A tier. Then we have Tesla. As I record this, they just announced their master plan part 4, probably one of the most innovative, fastest execution, and biggest vision companies on this entire list. From a compensation perspective, they often offer you the ability to buy options instead of getting the shares outright. They say, hey, you can get the shares, or you can get double or triple or quadruple the shares, but as options. So they really let you invest into a long-term growth. They work you very, very hard. They expect you to get onboarded and ramped up super fast. But if you want to work for an innovative company, one that has a really audacious vision and super fast execution and impact and results over everything else, then this company will certainly deliver. I can't put it in S tier just because of the compensation piece, but everything else I would put it right on the level of Google, maybe even above Google. And maybe I need to reorganize this to actually put some of these A tiers into S tier, because depending on where we draw the line, because certainly leaving Tesla and Google out of these categories, maybe it's a little bit controversial. A few final ones we have. So Walmart is one of the, obviously an e-commerce giant. It has been able to compete with Amazon toe to toe, and it is a great transition company, a great one. So you can go from I would put it somewhere around Salesforce. It's greater than Salesforce, not quite at Microsoft level, but very, very close. It gives you the ability to travel. There's a lot of roles available, so you can jump into Walmart. It's still pretty high paid, not the highest paid. And I think it should be one of your target companies if you are not on any of these companies. And if you're starting first from the bottom, I would recommend something like Target, Best Buy, IBM, maybe some gaming, maybe some fintech, Capital One. All of these companies make sense from a starting point perspective. D companies, I would kind of avoid, but C companies are a good jumping in point. Now that I mention it, perhaps Intel and AMD should be moved into the D category, but HP and Dell actually give you the ability to travel further. So we will reorganize it like this. Like that. This is perfect. Intel, AMD, then AT&T, then Paramount. All right, a few other ones. Oracle. This is, of course, a gigantic company. Does not get you a whole lot of visibility. Does not get you a whole lot of mobility. Doesn't get you a tremendous amount of pay. So I will put it somewhere around C tier, kind of in the middle to the top of the C tier. Now, Palantir is a relatively recent addition. Obviously, it's a defense contractor, defense company. And the reason it's on this list is because it can get you quite a lot if you have worked in Palantir. It's certainly a lot more recognizable than a ton of these companies, and especially in specific areas. So I will put it somewhere in the middle of B tier, right around here, next to Walmart, because it is situational. So maybe right here, because it's not always relevant, but in the right place. And certainly they pay quite a lot, and they will give you a recognizable points. Because of that, I think they belong firmly in the B tier. That only leaves a few companies. So Atlassian, which is a well-known, but it's an organizational company for other businesses, probably belongs somewhere in C tier, right here, or maybe above HP and Dell, because you can get a little bit more. They have a suite of companies, so you can kind of travel to more of these companies from there. So it could be a decent spot if you are, again, not on this list at all and you're trying to make your way in. It could be a good one. The other S tier company is, of course, as you anticipated, OpenAI. And it goes to the left of Meta as our number one company. I think they recently reported that they handle something like 20% of the traffic that Google does on any given time period. I mean, extraordinarily influential. I think 100% of OpenAI employees are millionaires, at least on paper. And it is probably the hardest company to get into right now. So Meta, you can actually get into. I mean, we've placed plenty of people in Meta. OpenAI, much, much harder to get into, to even approach them to be able to go in for an interview, and much harder yet to actually get an offer. However, if you have worked at OpenAI, that means you can get a callback anywhere. Certainly any company that has anything to do with AI, you're going to get an immediate callback. You're probably going to command way higher compensation, and you will have full ability to travel anywhere you want from a corporate or company perspective over the next foreseeable future, 5-7 years. Beyond that, it's hard to predict. Now, let's sanity check some of these. So this makes sense. I think it would make sense to put ultimately some of these companies at the S tier. So they've now made a triumphant jump into S tier, and this is the proper ranking. So Google is still up there. Netflix is still up there. From our original FAANG company, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, and Netflix, we only have Google, Meta, and Netflix. So we've lost Amazon. Amazon dropped down to A, and Microsoft dropped down to B, and Apple dropped down to A. So it's Apple's still kind of hanging on there. And in terms of these two, Uber and Apple, I can explain it either way. I can't quite decide. I'll leave it like this for now. I want you to think about it in a couple of ways. First of all, your target, if you eventually want to make $1 million, you can do it with all these companies. You can also do it with all of these companies in A tier. And you can, not quite $1 million, but you can push 700,000-800,000 in most of the companies on this list. In fact, that could be a good barometer, in which case Pinterest probably falls right off this list, and Comcast, because you can't really make 700,000 in those companies. Comcast, you actually still could, but it's a relatively high rose. There's very few of those. But the rest of these companies, that does make sense. I want you to think about C tier as your entry tier if you are not on this list at all. D tier, sort of some companies to avoid. In fact, I have another one. I added Twilio to the list. It's somewhere around D tier. It is well known, but only for specific companies, communication space, and I think we could do a whole bunch more companies on this list. For now, D tier is the tier where if you are there, great. You can leverage that and try to move your way up to C or B. But if you're not there, you should probably avoid these companies unless you want to go down a very specific path. But I'd love to know where you disagree with any of my ranking. And of course, if you're looking for your next job as a PM, we inside the Product Career Accelerator work with proactive and experienced PMs to help them land their next job. So if you're interested in chatting with our team about how we could potentially partner, use the link in the description to set up a time to speak. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time.